Hey guys, thanks so much for checking out my show. I really appreciate it. Please click to subscribe. I've been trying to stay on top of literally every little element of the Charlie Kirk assassination, especially when it comes to the case against the alleged assassin, Tyler Robinson. So I want to update you on everything that's happened over the last 24 hours with Tyler Robinson. Also, in this episode, I'm going to speak at length with a defense attorney about Tyler Robinson's possible defenses in court. If this goes to trial, what could his defense be? And I know there's been all sorts of theories out there about whether or not he is actually the person who killed Charlie Kirk. But putting all that aside, things are different in court. Theories online might not necessarily fly in court. What defenses would actually work in a court of law? What have we learned so far up until this point about what a possible defense could be? I'm going to get into all of that in a minute. But first, I want to update you on this latest court hearing that just happened. It was a virtual hearing. Tyler Robinson was not on camera, but he was listening, and he did acknowledge that he was there. It's actually one of the only times I've heard his voice. Listen to this.
And Mr. Robinson, I understand, is appearing by WebEx. Mr. Robinson, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
So again, he wasn't on camera, but he was listening. There were a couple of things that came up. First of all, I was watching because I thought perhaps there would be a decision made about whether cameras would be allowed inside the courtroom long term, which is a big deal. First of all, as a member of the media, as a reporter, I'm always very, very pro camera. I think that it is important in every case for the public to be able to see what is going on. I think it makes people trust the process more, but especially in this case where there are already so many questions about what actually happened, I think it would be, just personally, again, as a reporter, I think it'd be a mistake not to let the public see what's going on. So I thought there would be a decision made today. There was not a decision made today. The judge has not officially made a decision about whether cameras will be allowed inside the courtroom. So we're going to have to wait on that. There were a couple of other decisions made, though. First of all, Tyler Robinson's lawyers, and he's got three, by the way. He's got a Utah-based attorney, and then he's got two pretty high-profile attorneys who are coming in from California, which is all very expensive, paid for by taxpayers. But they have been fighting for him to be allowed to wear civilian clothes in court. That's what they call them, civilian clothes. Basically, not like a prison outfit, not not a green jump or a orange jumpsuit, but regular clothes, suit and tie or sweater, whatever. You remember Brian Koberger was allowed to do that. Luigi Mangione has been allowed to do that in some cases. Basically, the reason behind that is that the defense attorneys don't want him to look like a criminal because he hasn't been convicted, innocent until proven guilty. And the judge decided that he can wear civilian clothes. Listen to what the judge said.
Mr. Robinson sits before this court presumed innocent, and that presumption remains unless and until each element of every offense charged against him is proved beyond a reasonable doubt. To date, this has not occurred, and the presumption of innocence remains. Balancing these factors, the court finds that Mr. Robinson's right to the presumption of innocence outweighs the minimal inconvenience of permitting civilian attire, and Mr. Robinson shall be dressed as one who is presumed innocent. Accordingly, the defendant's request to appear in civilian clothing for all pretrial proceedings is granted.
Now remember, Tyler Robinson is presumed innocent at this point. That is the way that our system works. The other decision the judge had to make is whether or not Tyler Robinson would remain shackled, just like the fact that he wants to wear civilian clothes so that he does not appear guilty. It's the same with the shackles. His attorneys are arguing that when you shackle somebody and people see that on TV, they assume that the person is guilty. Ultimately, the judge ruled that the shackles in some form will stay. Listen to the judge on that.
The court recognizes that Mr. Robinson has no criminal history and no record of misconduct while in custody. However, the charges he faces are extraordinarily serious, carrying potential penalties of life imprisonment or death. The safety of Mr. Robinson, the attorneys, court staff, and the public must remain the court's highest priority. The emotional nature of these proceedings also raise the risk of disruption. Given these factors, the defendant's request to appear without restraint is denied.
So Tyler Robinson right now remains in the Utah County Jail. That's the county where Charlie Kirk was murdered. I was in Utah County a couple of weeks ago. I spoke with the sheriff there and the undersheriff, who are really, I mean, the jail is under them, and he's in their jail. He had some interesting things to say about, they had some interesting things to say about letters that he's receiving, and then also just, what he's been like in jail. Listen to what the sheriff and undersheriff in Utah County told me.
He's in your jail, right, still?
He is.
Yeah, which is where we are now, right, this building?
Yeah.
Has there been anything unusual with him in the jail? I mean, what has it been like having such a sort of, I guess, high-profile inmate?
I don't want to really talk about him specifically,
Yeah.
but it has brought a lot of, it's interesting, just the amount of correspondence we get for him, people from across the nation that's either on both sides very upset with him or supportive of him. That has been interesting to see. And then, of course, as we move forward into court appearances, there's no question that this is a very high-profile case and will remain that way. And so it's something that we put a lot of resource into making sure that everything goes off right and we don't have any incidents occur with safety on either side of the spectrum on this, and that he can get a fair trial like our Constitution requires.
Is he following all the rules?
I walked down in the jail a few days ago just to kind of check on him. Everything looks good. He's nothing strange, just like everyone else. So he's getting what he needs, what he's required to have, and everybody's down there's keeping an eye. So, yeah.
The judge also made a point to say that there have been no disciplinary issues with Tyler Robinson in jail, that he has no criminal history, and that he's been behaving in jail. But ultimately, the judge decided that he still needs to have the shackles just because of the nature of what he's accused of and keeping the courtroom safe. There was supposed to be a preliminary hearing, which is a hearing when you could actually get a lot of new information and evidence. That was supposed to happen later this week. That's now been postponed to January, which really comes as no surprise to me, just because there's a lot of evidence for both sides to go over. I'm joined now by Ambrosio Rodriguez, a defense attorney. He's also a former prosecutor in California. It's good to see you again, Ambrosio.
See you.
I wanted to ask you about everything with Tyler Robinson, who's obviously the Charlie Kirk suspect. Interest is sky high right now. The judge emphasized that at the last hearing, saying that he wants to protect Robinson's rights. A lot of people have questions about whether this is the right guy. I mean, if you look online, there's a lot of theories that this might not be the right person. Even when I was in Utah, people were coming up to me wanting to talk about it, saying, like, do you really think they have the right guy? I was curious, talking to you as a defense attorney, if you were his lawyer, what are you thinking right now? What are possible defenses that you see at this point?
This is a very difficult case. Obviously, and I'm talking just as a defense attorney because of the level of publicity it has. And I don't remember the last time that there was a murder case where at the funeral service or the memorial service, not just the president of the United States showed up, but the entire senior White House staff and everybody in kind of the Republican or right-wing commentators. And this has taken, and there is, when it comes to conspiracy theories or alternative theories, there is kind of an almost, he's kind of at an Oswald level, right? That there's anyone but him. I think that it's very difficult to talk about how to defend him, given that there's a lot of information out there, but there's nothing concrete as to where you begin. There are the mechanics of how a murder like this could have happened. I think as his attorney, I would begin by hiring experts, right? I would need a firearms expert. A lot of times, we're defense lawyers, we need experts to tell us not necessarily what to say, but to kind of educate us on things. Um, and so I'm going to need a firearms expert. I'm going to need someone who can show me how that shot could be made from that distance. And then I would need kind of a deep dive into the psychology of him and his family, right? Because from media reports, there was a confession to his parents. And that I think is really one of the most damaging part of evidence, the most damaging evidence. And I would need to start to speaking with the witnesses. And really, a lot of it is something we will never know because it's protected by attorney-client privilege, which is what does he tell his attorney?
Do you think now that the death penalty is on the table, like, it seems like, at least if you listen to what police are saying, that his parents were cooperative. They helped him turn himself, they, pushed him to turn himself in, do the right thing. But it's unclear whether the parents are cooperating anymore. And the reason could be now it's set in that the state wants to execute their son. And as a
Right.
parent, are you willing to continue to cooperate now with killing your son, essentially? Do you think that parents could end up helping his defense? Could things change with them because they realize they wanna kill him?
Yeah. I think that it's one thing to, a lot of times parents will turn in or spouses will turn in their significant other or their children, not really understanding the implications of what the punishment can be. I don't think they maybe understood where this would eventually end up. um and it's a it could be a situation where they get called as witnesses by the prosecution, right, as to the facts of the case. And if it goes to death penalty, which I think it will, given everything that's been going on, they would be called by the defense as witnesses as well. Because in a death penalty case, there's two phases. There's the guilt phase to see whether or not the case can be proven beyond reasonable doubt. And then there is the penalty phase. And during the penalty phase, both sides, the prosecution puts in factors in aggravation, and the defense can put in factors of mitigation, and that the parents could come in and testify during that time. So we'll see. But there is a double-edged sword where if you made statements to the police, those statements are already made. They're already recorded. And so they're limited in what they can do because they don't have a right not to testify. If they don't testify, they can be held in contempt. Now, we've seen that before, and the kind of the most famous in memory to me is the Susan McDougal case with Clinton during the Whitewater case, where she spent 2 years in federal custody because she refused to testify. So their only alternative would be to refuse to testify and then be placed in custody. So, and see how long they're willing to stay in custody in contempt of court.
Is there a world where his parents switch and end up wanting to help him, start working with his lawyers and coming up with, and again, we don't know all the details of exactly how the confession happened, but you know what I mean? Is that, I guess we've just
No,
assumed all
I
along.
do. And look, I'm not going to answer this as a parent. I'll answer this. Not as a lawyer. I'm going to answer as a parent, where I don't see how they don't. Just I don't know them. Obviously, I don't know anything about them, but I don't see how you. I can understand them wanting him to be held accountable, but not executed. And that is a level of hell for a parent that I don't wish on anyone.
Is there any chance that a defense could be that the parents pressured him into confessing to something he didn't do?
It could, but then you have the text messages, right? The text that's because my understanding is the parents see the picture from him going down the stairs. They question him about it, and it goes from there. But even you don't need the parents in order to get to his state of mind and his thoughts and everything else. and his confession, really, that was done through these text messages. The issue with the parents is just it just makes it just adds a level of human drama and human suffering, but it doesn't necessarily the prosecution doesn't hinge on that.
Yeah. Do you think he may have been set up? I'm just trying to think of defenses here, like in the sense of could the defense try to say there's another suspect and he was sort of framed? Because that's one of the big theories online.
Right, and that's a great question, but for that there is the rules don't allow a defendant to just say somebody else did it, right? You can't just kind of throw conspiracy theories out there. And the reason for that is that so a trial, a defendant is presumed innocent, right? And so the prosecution has to prove that he's guilty beyond reasonable doubt. Sure, everybody knows that. But if your defense is that somebody else did it, right? It wasn't me, it was John Smith. You have to provide evidence that you are going to put forward that John Smith did it, right? It doesn't have to be beyond reasonable doubt, and you have to have that evidence. You have to turn it over to the defense. The judge has to allow you to do it. So it cannot just, you can't call a blogger and have him or her come testify as to their theory as to why it was somebody else. There has to be facts that you can submit into evidence that the jury can make their own determination.
So you, as a defense attorney, can't just say there's someone else who did it. You'd actually have to figure out who that person is. Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that somebody else did it. I do have to provide evidence to the court that shows that it could have been somebody else and that the jury can make their own determinations. So,
Okay.
for example, in my case, that I think that John Smith did it. It wasn't me, it was John Smith. I have to have some evidence pointing to John Smith being culpable, being guilty, and that's an alternative theory, and that the law enforcement screwed up the investigation, and this is who they should have gone after.
Okay.
Okay.
What about a co-conspirator? Could that come into play? Could they try to say that someone else, almost like that Tyler Robinson was the fall guy and there was sort of like someone who pushed him to do it?
Yes, but he would still have to testify in that situation. Like I'll go back to Oswald. Remember, Oswald says, "I'm just the patsy. I'm just the patsy." Right? Okay, if you're the patsy, then you have to come forward with evidence saying who set you up, who are you taking the fall for, and if it's a co-conspirator, and I'm taking the fall, this is who did it. So he would have to come forward with evidence.
So again, what does your gut say? I mean, how do you think this plays out? We don't have all the evidence yet, like you said. I mean, it's apparently a lot, but what's the defense going to be?
I would have to imagine from what I know from media reports that he didn't do it, that maybe he saw it or he was in the area. But then again, then you have the text messages between him and the roommate,
Yeah.
right? And those are you don't even need the parents as witnesses with those text messages, right? And so, look, my my prediction is that he will be convicted. Whether or not he gets death or not, I think that's the real battle in this case. And that you have a lot of mitigation by the defense in order to spare his life, meaning he has no criminal record. He was a bright young man. You can very easily make the argument that he was radicalized online, and that he acted through this radicalization and that he was poisoned by the internet. And I think that argument has a lot of weight. I think more and more we all know people on a personal level that have changed dramatically and politically because of the internet in a way that almost become unrecognizable. Right? It almost makes that uncle who talks about politics too loudly during Thanksgiving and annoys everyone seem preferable to the kind of online radicalization that we see with coworkers, family members. So I think that will be the real legal battle. We'll be trying to save his life.
You mentioned the dignitaries at his funeral. I was just thinking about this. I mean, you had not only the governor, which is a big position, saying we have the right guy, but you have the director of the FBI, Kash Patel, going public. And then you even have the president of the United States, who said publicly in interviews, we got the guy, we got the right guy. I mean, if you're a defense attorney, can he really get a fair trial when literally the president of the United States has said this guy is guilty?
That's a great question. Right? That's a great question. And I've never seen a. I would imagine that the defense attorney is going to make a motion to change venue, right? But change it to where in Utah, right? There's no. Where would you go in Utah? I mean, you would almost want to go to a because this is a political case, right? It's a political assassination. You would want a blue state. Like, give me Colorado next door. At least I have a chance with the jury pool to have a fair trial. But then, that I've never heard of anything like that of a state crime being tried in a different
Yeah, I
state.
was gonna say I've heard
It-
other counties, but any
right. I
state I've
never,
never seen.
I mean, the worst thing the judge can say is no. So, but I don't see that happening because there's no physical jurisdiction. A Utah judge doesn't have any jurisdiction in the state of Colorado I mean, that just couldn't happen. So I don't know. Eventually, he's going to get a trial. I would imagine jury selection to take weeks. And I guess the best maybe thing he can do is have the trial move to Salt Lake City, where it's to consider, the most liberal part of the state of Utah. Um, but again, this is not it. The defense can make the argument that that everyone has already made up their mind. I'm asking you as a potential juror not to do that and to do your duty as a juror. I have found that jurors take their job very seriously. Like serious, you pick a jury and you'll get jackasses, you'll get people that are not serious. They're going to be gone. But people who take this duty very seriously. Um, and I think you'll find the most fair jury you can find um, in in this case because I have faith in people's willingness to be fair and impartial, and I base that not on idealism but on experience.
Hmm. From the beginning, the governor has been saying that they'll go after the death penalty. Again, this is like
Right.
the governor of the state, and the prosecutor too. Then after that, I mean, is there any chance there's not a trial? Because I'm just trying to think this through. If they're that hell bent on the death penalty and they think their evidence is that good, it doesn't seem like they would offer a deal, right?
No, there's no deals to be had. The closest I can come in comparison is the Boston Marathon case. Right? These are young men, radicalized, commit a horrible crime, and eventually they're not on death row. The jury wouldn't grant the death penalty. So, and the same thing happened in Florida with one of the was it Parkland? I forgot the name of the high school. Where I think
Yeah,
it was
Herman
Parkland. Yeah,
Douglas, yeah, Parkland, yeah.
yeah. That he didn't get the death penalty either. And so, look, I've tried death penalty cases. There's nothing like it. Asking a jury to sentence someone to death is like nothing else. I remember my first death penalty case. I lost 25 pounds, and that jurors take that more seriously than I think them as portrayed in the media. It is not automatic at all. They take that solemn duty very seriously. So I'm not convinced that them getting the death penalty is going to be automatic or easy at all. And in fact, the fact that everyone's against him, like there's an entire political establishment is against him, can very much work in his favor when it comes to the death penalty, because jurors will feel like this guy doesn't have a chance, and we're the only ones between the mob.
Hmm. Are there things that you think are weird about this case and investigation? Again, there are so many people who have questions about the autopsy. What did they find? Was there even an autopsy? They haven't really said much about an autopsy. We're not really sure that the roof, how he was able to get up on the roof, get down from the roof, the bullet not going fully through him. People think it doesn't make any sense. I mean, has anything stood out to you on that front?
I don't have enough information to really. I think the problem is that at this point, the district attorney's office in that county hasn't really taken the time to address these issues, right? Because they don't have, very few jurisdictions have the experience to deal with the international media, right? It's LA and New York. That's it. And I don't know if they've, I don't know why they haven't had a press conference in which they can respond to these issues. And whether that a bullet traveling that far is stopped when it hits something, when it hit Charlie Kirk, and then it stopped, that doesn't surprise me. That's not completely out of the realm of possibility or reasonable possibility of what a bullet would do once it strikes, especially from that distance. If it was at a short distance from 6 feet away, sure, but we're talking it was what, a couple of hundred yards,
Yeah, I think about
if I'm
100.
not
Yeah.
right. And then the fact that it finally, I mean, the bullet itself was eventually, bullets don't travel forever. And once they hit something, they will stop, especially from that kind of a distance.
Yeah.
I mean, you can kind of go on. There's the fact that there are a lot of unexplained things at this point, I think has a lot to do with the district attorney's office not meeting the moment when it comes to press and media relations.
Hmm. We thought the judge would make a decision about cameras. That's come up, whether they're going to allow cameras long term in the courtroom. And he did not make a decision and sort of said he's still waiting for more input from both sides. It just seems to me, with a case with this many different theories and public interest, like it would be kind of crazy not to have cameras. And I don't know if that's just me from a reporter perspective or.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think it has everything to do with the disposition of the judge and who he is as a person. If he's because no judge wants to be Judge Ito again. All right, with all due respect to Judge Ito. Um, and every judge, especially if you're my age or older, just remembers the Simpson trial and what bringing cameras did for the Simpson trial. And you're taking the risk of everything, having it publicized on TV, and it he may just not want he might prefer the commentary and conspiracies online than the reality of having cameras in his courtroom for months.
But if you actually want people to have faith in the process and believe the evidence, which they already don't, like, isn't that important?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I don't disagree with you. I think that I'm not sure what I would do as the judge. I would probably um, side on allowing the cameras to let the light in for everyone to see the evidence. I also think that there's a certain population that isn't going to believe that it wasn't him,
Hmm.
no matter what.
No matter what, yeah.
Uh,
The judge did make a decision that they are going to allow him to wear civilian clothes. But he'll have to remain shackled, but he will get to wear the civilian clothes. What do you think of that move?
I think that's appropriate, and I've done it in my cases where there's high media attention, and especially during the process of going back and forth to court, these images are going to be shown over and over again. That way, your jury pool has an image of him in a young man in a suit as opposed to a young man in county yellow or orange or whatever color they have in that county.